Welcome to the silent verdict.
With Clara Monroe and Elias Gray.
Has Qatar asked for anything in exchange for that $400 million luxury jumbo jet? And how can the American people be so sure that they will not in the future?
Well, I think what happens with the plane is that, we're very disappointed that it's taking Boeing so long to build a new Air Force One. We have an Air Force One that's 40 years old. And if you take a look at that compared to the new plane of the equivalent, stature at the time, it's not even the same ballgame. You look at some of the Arab countries and the planes they have parked alongside of the United States of America plane. It's like from a different planet. And it's close to 40 years old, might be more than 40 years old now. And we, when I first came in, I signed an order to get it built. I took it over from the Obama administration. They had originally agreed. I got the price down much lower. And then when the election didn't exactly work out the way that it should have, a lot of work was not done on the plane because a lot of people didn't know. They made change orders that were so stupid, so ridiculous, and it ended up being a total mess. I think that was a very nice gesture. Now, I could be a stupid person and say, oh, no, we don't want a free plane. We give free things out. We'll take one, too.
A $400 million gift, just in time for a birthday. But is it just a thank you? Or maybe could there be something else going on entirely?
It's quite the situation we're looking at.
Yeah, we've got this foreign royal family. We're calling them the Carters, and they're proposing to give the U.S. government a Boeing 747-8 jet.
And not just any jet. This thing is apparently kitted out like a flying luxury apartment.
Seriously. Lounges, bedrooms, bathrooms, galleys, entertainment systems, the works.
And the plan, as I understand it, is for this plane to step in as Air Force One temporarily.
Right, temporarily.
Yeah.
Before it gets handed over in, 2029 to a Trump Presidential Library Foundation.
A foundation which, it's worth noting, doesn't actually exist yet.
Which just adds another layer, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
The whole thing just immediately throws up so many questions. Forget the sheer size of the gift for a second.
The $400 million is hard to forget.
True. But you've got the legal side, the constitutional questions, the ethics of taking something this big from another country.
And the practical side, too. Can you even do this?
Exactly. So our goal here is really to unpack all of that. Look at the Constitution, see if there are any precedents, and just try to figure out what accepting this kind of gift would actually mean.
Okay, let's dive in. The first thing that screamed out to me was the legality. Is this even allowed? My mind immediately went to the Foreign Emoluments Clause. What is that exactly?
Right, the Foreign Emoluments Clause. It's in Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. And fundamentally, it says that anyone holding, an office of profit or trust under the United States can't accept any present emolument, office, or title from any foreign state.
Without Congress saying it's okay.
Precisely. Without the consent of Congress. And the thinking behind it, the reason the framers put it there, was this deep concern about foreign powers trying to buy influence.
Through gifts, titles, things like that?
Exactly. They wanted a constitutional firewall against that kind of foreign leverage.
Okay, so a $400 million custom-fitted Boeing 747-8 from a foreign royal family. That sounds exactly like the kind of present they were worried about, doesn't it?
It certainly seems to fit the description. It's not, a ceremonial sword or a small token. It's a massive asset.
So is there any counter-argument, any way this could be seen as okay?
Well, the main argument being floated is that the gift isn't technically to the president as an individual, but rather to the U.S. government itself.
Ah, okay. So the idea is if it's for the government, it sidesteps the personal prohibition in the clause.
That seems to be the line of reasoning, and proponents might point to, say, the Reagan Library having a retired Air Force One on display as sort of a comparison.
But that feels different, doesn't it? That's a decommissioned plane, a piece of history.
It's very different. This is a brand new, state-of-the-art jet. And the plan isn't just for display, it's for active, albeit temporary, government use.
Before being transferred to a specific person's future foundation.
Exactly. That whole transfer later part really complicates the gift to the government argument. It adds a dimension the Reagan plane example just doesn't have.
It feels like a totally different category. And that brings up another potential issue. What about our own internal rules?
Yeah.
The Domestic Emoluments Clause. That's about preventing presidents from profiting beyond their salary, right?
Yes. The Domestic Emoluments Clause aims to prevent the president from receiving financial benefits from the federal government or state governments beyond their official compensation.
So even if this plane goes to the government first, Could the fact that it's ultimately earmarked for this future private foundation linked to the president, could that potentially violate the domestic clause?
That's a really interesting question. It definitely blurs the lines. Is the primary benefit ultimately for the government, or is it structured in a way that provides a massive future asset to a former president via their foundation? That's the tension.
It really is. And this whole situation, it starts to edge into territory like bribery and public corruption laws, doesn't it?
It certainly raises those specters.
We're talking federal statutes here. Even if the Carter family isn't explicitly saying, here's a plane, now do this for us, could the sheer size of the gift itself create a sort of implicit quid pro quo, or at least the appearance of one?
That's the tricky part. Federal law, specifically 18 U.S.C. Section 201, covers bribery. But the Supreme Court, especially in cases like McDonald v. United States, has really narrowed the definition.
How so?
They've emphasized needing a very clear, explicit link between the thing of value, the gift, and a specific official act performed or promised in return. It has to be more than just goodwill or access.
So a general thank you gift, even a huge one, might not meet that strict definition.
It might not. There was a more recent case involving a mayor in Portage, Indiana. He accepted something described as a token of appreciation after steering city contracts. The courts have made proving bribery based on gratuities gifts given after an official act, supposedly as thanks, much harder.
They want proof of the deal beforehand, essentially.
Largely, yes. The focus is increasingly on that explicit quid pro quo agreement before the act. This makes prosecuting based on post-service gifts, no matter how extravagant, quite challenging.
But even if it's legally difficult to prove bribery, a $400 million jet is a thank you. It just feels different, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then there's this whole other layer that's been in the news, presidential immunity.
Right.
Could the act of accepting this jet, even if it's for the government initially, be framed as an official act by the president? And if so, could that shield it from scrutiny later on under these emerging immunity arguments?
That's a very complex and frankly cutting-edge legal question right now. The argument could potentially be made that accepting a gift on behalf of the nation falls within the scope of official presidential duties.
And if the Supreme Court leans towards a broad interpretation of immunity for official acts,
then yes, theoretically, the acceptance itself could be argued as protected from certain kinds of legal challenges, like a bribery prosecution down the road. It's a very murky area.
it feels like a legal minefield. What about those earlier lawsuits? I remember there were cases brought against the former president, specifically about the emoluments clause related to his businesses. What happened with those? Did they give us any clarity?
That's another fascinating piece of this puzzle. Several suits were filed, arguing that payments to his businesses from foreign governments violated the Foreign Emoluments Clause, but they never resulted in a definitive Supreme Court ruling on the merits.
Why not?
Well, strategically, when the cases were heading towards the Supreme Court, the government often argued to delay. Then, once the president left office, the court dismissed the pending cases as moot.
Moot meaning?
Irrelevant now.
Exactly. Because he was no longer in office, the court said there was no longer a live controversy regarding him violating the clause while president. So they essentially wiped the slate clean, vacating the lower court decisions without ever deciding the core constitutional questions.
So they punted, basically. Avoided setting a precedent on whether those kinds of business dealings actually violated the clause. That's one interpretation. It certainly shows a reluctance from the court to wade directly into defining the precise boundaries of the Emoluments Clause as applied to a modern president.
Which means there's no clear Supreme Court ruling saying you can't accept a $400 million jet, indirectly or otherwise.
Not directly, no. It leaves a lot of ambiguity.
Okay, let's flip back to the arguments for this being okay. Besides the gift to the government angle, what else is being put forward? We mentioned the Reagan Library comparison.
Right, the idea that if a presidential library can display a retired Air Force One, then accepting this jet for eventual transfer is somehow analogous.
But we already poked holes in that one. The context is just completely different.
It really is. One's a historical artifact. The other is a brand new, cutting-edge aircraft intended for temporary government service before going to a private entity. And let's not forget, the U.S. government would be on the hook for actually using and maintaining this plane as Air Force One for a time.
Which brings us to the sheer practicalities, or maybe impracticalities. This isn't just accepting a painting for the Oval Office, converting a civilian 747-8 into Air Force One. That's a monumental task, right?
Absolutely enormous. Air Force One isn't just a fancy plane, it's a hardened military command center. It needs highly classified communication systems, anti-missile countermeasures, EMP hardening, things you don't just bolt on.
Experts have said it takes years and massive, massive expense to do that kind of retrofit.
Years, yes, and hundreds of millions, potentially eclipsing the supposed value of the gift itself. The idea that this saves money is questionable at best.
And then there's the security risk. Accepting an aircraft, especially one this complex, from any foreign power seems risky, but particularly from one the U.S. has, at times, had a complicated relationship with, even accusing them of sponsoring terrorism in the past.
That's a huge red flag for security professionals. The potential for hidden surveillance equipment, backdoors in the software, vulnerabilities, it's immense. You'd essentially have to strip the plane down to the bare metal and rebuild it to be sure, which again adds to the time and cost.
I remember seeing that even some Republican senators like Shelley Moore Capito and Ted Cruz raised serious concerns about exactly the espionage risk.
Yes, those concerns cut across party lines. The security implications are just too significant to ignore. It's not a partisan issue, it's a national security issue.
So even setting aside the constitutional questions, the practical hurdles and security risks seem almost insurmountable.
They are incredibly significant, yes.
And this all circles back to that blurry line between a bribe and a gratuity. Even if there's no explicit deal now, this incredibly valuable gift from a foreign monarchy just hangs there. And as you said, the courts have made it harder to prosecute gifts given after the fact.
The legal standard focuses on that prior agreement. But the sheer scale here, $400 million. It keeps the question of undue influence alive, even if proving outright bribery under current interpretations is tough. It pushes the boundaries of what might be considered an acceptable thank you.
It really does. It feels like we're operating in this strange legal and ethical gray area. And, considering the political context, I've heard people talk about this administration strategy, sometimes called flood the zone.
Ah, yes, the Steve Bannon concept.
Right. The idea being you create so many controversies, so many fires to put out, that the opposition and the media just get overwhelmed and can't focus effectively on any one thing. Could this whole jet saga be part of something like that?
It's impossible to know the intent for sure, but the proposal itself, its audacity, its complexity, the multiple legal and ethical questions it raises, certainly fits the pattern of something that would consume a lot of oxygen and potentially distract from other issues. It generates noise.
Okay, let's just quickly recap some of the key moments, the turning points in how this unfolded. First, there was the initial offer itself and the then president's reaction.
Yes, his public enthusiasm, calling it a gimme. That immediate, seemingly uncritical embrace set a certain tone right away.
Then came the dose of reality. The Air Force weighing in, saying, hold on, this conversion is a massive, multi-year, super expensive project.
That practical assessment was crucial. It shifted the narrative from free plane to enormously complex and costly undertaking.
And alongside that, the security experts started raising the alarm about espionage.
Highlighting the inherent risks of accepting such a sensitive piece of equipment from a foreign power, that added a whole other layer of serious concern.
And almost immediately, you had the legal scholars piping up, pointing straight at the emoluments clause.
Yeah, bringing the constitutional questions right to the forefront, reminding everyone that this wasn't just about logistics or cost.
Then there's the whole backdrop of the Supreme Court, having previously avoided ruling on those other emoluments cases.
Right, that history of sidestepping the issue created uncertainty about how this might be handled legally.
Plus those more recent court decisions narrowing the definitions of bribery and gratuity.
Which, as we discussed, potentially lowered the legal barriers or at least made prosecution harder for this kind of arrangement.
And finally, the detail that really sticks out. The plane's ultimate destination being this Presidential Library Foundation. That doesn't even exist.
That future transfer plan just adds another layer of ethical questioning about who truly benefits and what the ultimate purpose of this incredibly generous gift really is.
So after wading through all of this, the Constitution, the court cases, the practicalities, the ethics, what's the verdict? Where do we land on this $400 million flying enigma?
Well, legally speaking, it's definitely murky. You've got the Foreign Emoluments Clause, which seems pretty directly applicable on its face.
Seems like it.
But the Supreme Court's past avoidance of the issue, coupled with the high bar set for proving bribery, means enforcement against a president is, let's say, extremely challenging. There's ambiguity there.
Okay, so legally ambiguous.
Yeah.
But ethically?
Ethically, I think it's much less ambiguous. Accepting a gift of this magnitude from a foreign monarchy, especially one with its own strategic interests, it just screams potential conflict of interest and undue influence.
Even if nothing is explicitly asked for in return, the appearance itself is problematic.
Exactly. The appearance of impropriety can be incredibly corrosive to public trust, regardless of whether a technical legal line was crossed.
And practically, is this plane ever going to be Air Force One?
Practically, the whole idea seems, well, frankly, pretty far-fetched. The logistical nightmare, the immense cost, the years of work, the unavoidable security vulnerabilities, it makes the entire plan seem highly impractical.
It's hard to see any real benefit for the U.S. taxpayer or government in this scenario.
The costs and risks seem to vastly outweigh any potential perceived savings from getting a free plane.
So you've seen how a $400 million gift can just rip open this Pandora's box of legal questions, ethical dilemmas, practical problems. What does it tell you, personally, about the balance of power and accountability when deals like this even get discussed at the highest levels?
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
And maybe more importantly, what safeguards do we actually have, or should we have, to prevent even the appearance, let alone the reality, of foreign influence right at the top? Something to chew on.